Breaking through the enemy in Wargroove is like trying to unravel the Gordian knot. Like its spiritual predecessor Advance Wars, Wargroove is all about tight, tooth-and-nail slugfests where every unit counters and is countered by another. On the one hand, this sometimes means the game can get bogged down in an hour of back-and-forth trench warfare, which can be exhausting. On the other, it creates a deep and highly tactical core loop where you need to use every tool available to you to prevail. I've always been a fan of games like this, but in my current role, I have to ask the question, can that depth be appreciated in bite-sized pieces? As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today, we're bringing Advance Wars back from the dead in Wargroove. Of all the games on the Nintendo DS, Advance Wars Dual Strike is probably the one I remember most fondly. Which is saying something, because there are a lot of good games on the DS. But the Advance Wars series has been hibernating for over a decade now, and nobody's ever really quite picked up where they left off. I mean, sure, we've had a few games that draw comparisons, but they just don't play the same. The fact that Advance Wars ends up breathed in the same sentence as games like Into the Breach by people including myself isn't so much because the games are actually that much alike, but more a commentary on how desperate people like myself are to find anything that can fill that hole. So yeah, and then Wargroove came out over the weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any idea how long I have waited for this? You had better believe that this is my jam! And Wargroove does not disappoint. Admittedly, it would be kind of hard for it to, considering it's fundamentally the same game, just with dragons instead of bombers and different developers at the helm. You start out on the opposite side of the map from your opponent, race to snatch up villages to boost your income, and dig in for some serious tug-of-warfare as you attempt to take down your opponent's citadel or their commander. And actually prevailing requires a combined arms approach as you try to navigate your way through multiple rock-paper-scissors synergies, attack templates, and attrition warfare to try and crack through your opponent's army before they break yours. But not only is the core loop of the game intact, but most of Wargroove's units are direct translations from Advance Wars' unit list. You've still got your stand-ins for infantry, tanks, artillery, and almost every unit you could throw onto the field in Advance Wars. And notably, Wargroove doesn't really add much in this respect either. That said, the game is more than an old classic redressed in fantasy duds. The most notable twist Wargroove introduces is the critical hit system. Every unit in the game has a special condition you need to fulfill to make them hit harder. Spearmen do more damage when adjacent to friendly spearmen. Trebuchets do more if you manage to hit the enemy right at the maximum edge of their range. Some of these are more feasible than others. Getting your cavalry to crit after charging exactly their full movement is a lot easier said than done. But ultimately, this small change to the formula makes big ripples in how it affects player behavior. With units like the Spearmen, for example, you only get the most out of them when they come in pairs, so you commit harder to making them and incorporating them into your strategy. It also goes a long way towards differentiating units, making Advance Wars' traditional system of overlapping rock-paper-scissors relationships even more complicated. In hindsight, it makes sense that they didn't risk adding more units to the formula when the dynamic between the existing ones is already this razor fine. But while the developers at Chucklefish have only made small changes to Advance Wars' core loop, they also spent a lot of time making a bunch of different modes. There is so much stuff to do in this game. There's the main campaign that I'm nowhere near the end of, an arcade mode that throws you through 5 maps against random commanders, local and online cross-platform multiplayer, a map builder that's already filled with everything from classic head-to-head maps to experimental co-op-centric levels, and a puzzle mode that I don't even know how to unlock. There are so many different ways to play this game that it's almost dizzying. The main way to play, however, is the campaign, which is worth checking out. Narratively, it's a pretty bog-standard medieval warfare story. The Queen of Cherrystone finds her country invaded, is forced to flee from her overwhelming opponent, and gets into hijinks and adventures as she fights her way across the continent trying to build an army to go take her country back. but mechanically, it's really well put together. Wargroove takes the Blizzard approach to strategy campaign design. You're rarely ever pitted against your opponent in a straight, even fight. Your enemy may get a bunch of super units you don't have access to, or you may be forced to assault a base without being able to recruit more troops. But there's always some complication to overcome. In my opinion, the campaign's main drawback is that it goes a little too long before it starts taking the training wheels off. The first 8 or so missions bottleneck how quickly you can build an army with only a single unit spawner, which makes the early section of the campaign drag a bit. But once the game starts giving you a little bit of leeway, it really starts to shine. But we're running out of time, so let's ask, what do you get out of 5 hours with Wargroove? And the answer to that really depends on what you're looking to do. If all you want to do is jump right in and start fighting, you'll have a great time bashing your way through the arcade and multiplayer offerings, the latter of which can also be played against computers. But if you're braving the campaign, good luck making much headway in just 5 hours. To be clear, it's a good campaign, it just takes a while to really get going, and I've still got a lot left to get through. That said, I do have one extreme time-saving tip for you. Turn off combat animations. It sucks to do because they actually look quite nice, but when you do that, you literally cut the length of a match in half. If your time's at a premium, this option is a godsend, and I highly recommend you take advantage of it. Ultimately, however, Wargroove is fantastic fun. Doubly so if you're already a fan of Advance Wars. It's everything a fan of that series could have ever wanted. 10 years was too long a wait, but a worthwhile spiritual successor is finally here. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. If you did, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. If you're looking for games that value your time and don't pad themselves, I'm your guy. And be sure to check out some of my other reviews or some longer form content while you're here. But regardless, thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.